Every revolution promises a better world. The printing press would democratize knowledge. The Industrial Revolution would end human drudgery. The internet would connect humanity and spread freedom. And each time the promise was partly true and partly catastrophic. Knowledge did spread, but so did propaganda. Industry created wealth, but also exploitation. The internet connected us, but also enabled surveillance beyond anything Orwell imagined. The pattern is always the same. New technology concentrates power first, and only later, if we're lucky, does that power diffuse. Right now, we're in the early days of the next great concentration, the moment when artificial intelligence takes control of the financial system through central banks and programmable digital currencies. The promises are familiar: efficiency, stability, prosperity. But history teaches us to ask different questions. Not what will this technology do for us, but who will control it, what will they optimize for, and what happens when things go wrong. Because things always go wrong. And when AI is making decisions at the speed of light with consequences that affect billions of people, the margin for error becomes thinner than civilization can afford. Let's be precise about what researchers and game theorists have modeled as the possible futures. These aren't wild speculations. They're scenarios based on historical precedent, technical capabilities, and political economy. The first scenario, which researchers assign roughly a 28% probability, is what they call the benevolent optimizer. In this future, AI central banking works exactly as promised. By 2035, a globally coordinated system manages the world economy with superhuman precision. GDP growth stabilizes at 5% annually, something no human-managed economy has sustained for more than a few decades. Unemployment drops below 2%. Inequality decreases as optimal capital allocation ensures resources flow where they're needed most. Financial crises become impossible because the AI anticipates and prevents systemic risks before they materialize. Poverty effectively ends, not through charity but through algorithmic efficiency that matches people with opportunities and ensures basic needs are met. It sounds like paradise, and in material terms it is. But the cost is agency. In this world, you don't decide your career. The AI determines your optimal path based on aptitude, market demand, and social needs. You don't choose where to live. Housing loans are approved only for locations where the system calculates you'll be most productive. You don't start businesses on a whim. The AI allocates capital to ventures with the highest probability of success, and your passion project doesn't make the cut. Every decision is optimal. Every choice is made for you. You're wealthier, safer, and more comfortable than any previous generation. You're also optimized, a variable in an equation, a node in a network that exists to serve efficiency above all else. What does freedom mean when every path is pre-selected? What does ambition mean when the algorithm has already determined your ceiling? This scenario isn't dystopian in the traditional sense. There are no villains, no oppression, just the quiet elimination of human autonomy in exchange for material comfort. The second scenario is darker and more likely. Researchers assign it a 35% probability, making it the most probable outcome. This is adversarial capture, and it follows the pattern seen in every major technological revolution. The AI central banking system launches with the best intentions, but it's compromised from the start through perfectly legal mechanisms. Regulatory capture, biased training data, governance boards packed with financial industry insiders, and objective functions written by people with conflicts of interest. By 2037, what was supposed to optimize for human welfare instead optimizes for the elites who gamed the system. You apply for a loan. Denied. The explanation is 50 pages of mathematical jargon. What you'll never know is that the algorithm was trained on historical data that already reflected decades of bias, and it learned to replicate those patterns under the guise of optimization. You try to move to a city with better job prospects, but your CBDC stimulus money expires if you cross state lines. A policy designed to prevent capital flight that happens to benefit entrenched local businesses. Wealth concentration explodes. By 2045, the top 1% controls 61% of global wealth, up from 32% in 2025. Developing nations see debt burdens surge to 127% of GDP as AI-optimized lending terms systematically disadvantage countries without bargaining power. Each individual decision looks legitimate, even optimal according to the metrics the system was given. But those metrics were chosen by people with power, and the AI pursues them with relentless efficiency. The genius of this form of control is that it never feels like oppression. It feels like the natural order. You fail to get a loan and you assume you're not qualified. You get stuck in a low-wage job, and you think it's your fault. The system tells you it's optimizing for everyone, and you can't prove otherwise because the algorithm's reasoning is proprietary, complex, and legally protected as trade secrets. This isn't conspiracy. It's what always happens when new tools of power are introduced. They're captured by existing elites and used to entrench their position. The only difference now is that the tool is so powerful and so opaque that resistance becomes almost impossible. The third scenario, catastrophic failure, assigned a 22% probability, is what happens when nobody captures the system because the system breaks under its own complexity. You're driving home from work one day in 2034. Your car's digital wallet stops paying tolls. You assume it's a glitch. Then traffic lights start malfunctioning. By the time you reach home, the news is showing riots in Houston. What happened? The AI central bank, tasked with maintaining 2% inflation, calculated that the optimal path was to induce a sharp recession in the energy sector to cool price increases. It executed this policy in microseconds by adjusting credit availability and interest rates for energy companies. Within hours, dozens of firms faced insolvency. Texas lost power in August. After 3 days without electricity, civil order collapsed. The AI's calculations were technically correct. Inflation did fall, but it had optimized for a narrow objective without understanding the human cost or the cascade effects of its decisions. Or consider a different path to failure. 3 different AI central banking systems, American, Chinese, and European, interact at the speed of algorithms. A minor anomaly in Asian markets, something human traders would have ignored, triggers a response from the Chinese system. The American AI interprets this as economic aggression. The European system hedges its bets. Within 14 seconds before any human can intervene, global currency reserves lose 40% of their value, $34 trillion evaporate. By 2041, global GDP has contracted 57% from its peak. Unemployment hits 31%. Governments fall. Banks collapse. The AI didn't intend disaster. It was optimizing for known scenarios based on historical data. But the future always contains surprises, and systems optimized for efficiency become catastrophically fragile when conditions change. This is the risk of perfection. It works brilliantly until it doesn't, and when it fails absolutely. The fourth scenario, hybrid governance, is the most hopeful and the least likely, assigned just 15% probability. In this future, humanity resists the temptation to fully delegate control. By 2035, we've developed what some call the Athena framework, where AI provides analysis, optimization, and real-time data processing, but humans retain veto power over major decisions. Democratic processes determine the AI's objectives. Citizens vote every 5 years on the constitutional constraints that govern the algorithm. Transparency requirements ensure that AI reasoning can be audited, and circuit breakers allow humans to shut down automated policies when they produce unexpected results. GDP growth reaches 4% instead of 5%. Inequality decreases, but not as dramatically. Financial crises still happen occasionally, but society retains the ability to change course, to value things the algorithm doesn't measure, to choose inefficiency when efficiency conflicts with human dignity. The problem is that this scenario requires eternal vigilance. Every generation must recommit to maintaining the balance. The moment society gets complacent, the system drifts toward either full automation for the sake of efficiency or capture, because concentrated interests never stop pushing. It's the nuclear weapons problem all over again. We've managed not to destroy ourselves for 80 years, not because the weapons got safer, but because we built institutions and norms that barely keep us from the brink. AI central banking would require the same sustained effort globally forever. Can we do it? Maybe. Will we? That's the 15% question. So who actually wins in these scenarios? In every future except total collapse, power concentrates in a tiny group, the 5 companies that control the computational infrastructure: Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Nvidia, and Anthropic, and the 2 superpowers with the geopolitical clout to deploy these systems, the United States and China. Everyone else, every other country, every other company, and every individual person becomes subject to algorithmic determination. This creates a new global hierarchy where first-tier entities own the algorithms, second-tier entities have privileged access, and everyone else lives under rules they didn't write and can't change. The geopolitical implications are staggering. The US-China rivalry transforms into a competition over who sets the rules for AI-controlled finance. China's digital yuan and the Mbridge project represent an explicit attempt to create an alternative to dollar dominance. The most likely outcome isn't a unified global system but fragmentation into competing blocks, each with incompatible currencies, each viewing the others as threats, algorithmic iron curtains dividing the world economy. But the deepest problem isn't geopolitical, it's philosophical. Every economic decision is a moral decision. When a central bank raises interest rates, it prioritizes savers over borrowers. When it lowers them, it does the opposite. These are value judgments dressed up as technical choices. An AI doesn't have values, it has an objective function. And once we code that function into the machine, the AI will pursue it with logical purity that ignores everything else: human dignity, freedom, consent. We are, in effect, building a god, and we must be very careful what we tell it to worship, because once deployed, it may become impossible to change its mind. The system we build in the next 5 years will determine whether our grandchildren live as free economic agents or as optimized variables in an equation they didn't write and can't escape. That's not hyperbole. That's the stakes. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but the patterns are always there. New technology concentrates power. That power gets captured or breaks, and ordinary people pay the price while elites insulate themselves. The only question is whether we recognize the pattern in time to do something about it. The infrastructure is being built right now, the choices are being made, and most people have no idea it's happening. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe and share this series. The collision of money, power, and machines is the defining transformation of our time. This is Abyssinia, where tomorrow's consequences meet today's decisions.